Today we are having our 21st Transparency Symposium. It's all about the Competition and Market Authority's investigation into the workings of the investment consulting and fiduciary management sector. They're being represented today by Alex Moore and Emily Chesel, who've just given a very good account of the rationale behind the proposals they've put together to help to transform the market and make it more competitive and fairer.
I think it's a fundamental milestone in terms of improving transparency and accountability within financial services, and in so doing, improving value for money for pensioners and their retirements and savings.
Very significant. I think already it's changing industry attitudes for the better, particularly with regard to transparency. There are a huge number of facts out on the table. In fact, I couldn't sleep this week with the hot weather, and there's over 1 million words that have been published around the CMA report.
I think it's already had its significance. I think it's changed the way in which consultants think about themselves. They're now a lot more accountable, and they know it. So I think even before it's been announced, I think the report has done most of its work.
Yes, it was a surprise to us that the CMA found an adverse effect on competition and AEC for both fiduciary management and investment consulting. The feeling we got in the lead up to the report is they might not go that far.
I think the biggest surprise for me in terms of the CMA provisional report was that some of the remedies that I would have expected to have been put forward didn't come through in this report. Therefore, I'm happy that we have the opportunity for further consultation. Specifically, I think one of the key issues that hasn't been addressed is the technical competence and training required for pension scheme trustees.
What's really surprised me is the extent of or lack of engagement by the trustees in DC, defined contribution pension scheme arrangements. So we have a system of pensions whereby pensions are moved from defined benefit to defined contribution. So more and more people will be invested their pensions through these institutional arrangements. So the lack of engagement of defined contribution trustees is particularly worrying.
I think they'll actually find that they have to probably get to pay less, get more, get better value for money. Yes, there will be a tougher ask with regard to the sort of selection of fiduciary mandates, and that will create an onus on trustees to do more work. But bearing in mind they're doing more work to do less work, I don't think that that's an exceptionally hard ask.
The amount of time and resources trustees would need, the best things that the CMA has recommended is to have these remedies of better processes around tendering, better processes around appointment of the investment consultants or the fiduciary manager, more monitoring of costs and performance, assessing performance, setting up strategies, setting us particular objectives. And for trustees, it means more work.
Considering whether large investment consultants effectively select large asset managers and get themselves into these long-term lock deals that perhaps don't consider the whole of market all of the time, don't necessarily consider the innovation coming from all asset managers.
I honestly don't think so. It doesn't pay them to be locked into particular fund managers. And in my experience, managers are interchangeable. And for DB and DC markets, we've not talked about, the investment performance is paramount. You're not going to get locked into a manager who's either under or outperforming. Doesn't pay.
The question as to whether they are or not is one that's very difficult to bottom out, because nobody really knows. Nobody really knows exactly what the nature of those deals are. Nobody really knows whether preferential deals are being made for very large schemes that are in some way undermining the value for money that smaller schemes may know. So there could be an argument that there should be greater scrutiny around that part of the market's activity.
Well, I certainly think that there's been some herding going on of trustees in the past, and that's partly investment consultants' fault. And as much as I represent investment consultants, I put my hands up and say that we haven't been particularly good at empowering trustees to be wise. Yeah. Do I think that trustees can be wise? Yes, I do. And I know some very wise ones. And I'd like to see more wisdom coming from them in crowd-like fashion rather than herd-like fashion.
In terms of investing in funds and indeed in asset allocation, there are major benefits to actually the wisdom of the crowd. Pooling best ideas together actually has value. Of course, herding behaviour, unfortunately, is just symptomatic of financial markets and human behaviour. What we actually need to then combine with that is proper accreditation, proper training, and proper professional standards as to when we're making those decisions around the asset allocation for a pension scheme, considering the liabilities of the pension scheme members and the underlying asset managers who then invest the assets on behalf of the scheme.
Well, obviously the next steps would be for the CMA to produce the final decisions and endorse the recommendations, the remedies they've produced. One of the things I would like to see happen is that trustees' governance models would take more center stage in these discussions. And also, I think behavioral biases that trustees have within their boards should be not underestimated, because when we did the study for the FCA, we've discovered there's a lot of biases that prevent trustees from doing more tendering or from switching to better providers. So I think there should be more awareness training of behavioral dynamics and also of power relationships that trustees have with investment consultants and their fund managers.
Clearly, what we have to do as an industry is to input into that consultation. We need to talk about these remedies. We need to refine those remedies so that when we do eventually get to the final CMA report in March 2019, that we have a practical, sensible set of packages, remedies that will address the issues that have been identified, that do engender better professionalism, that do lead to better manager selection, and ultimately to better outcomes for scheme members.
I think the next steps are that the industry as a whole should welcome with open arms the work that the CMA has done, should look at finessing the recommendations between now and when the consultation closes. We've got several weeks to do that, and to then live with it, to actually embrace the change, to implement those changes as effectively as possible, and to make sure we all remember that because we will probably then have the industry within the regulatory perimeter, the CMA could always start ratcheting up the standards required as time goes by. I think this has been a very, very good piece of regulatory intervention for the benefit of the consumer and, frankly, for the benefit of the health and integrity of the sector as a whole.